When my wife Karen and her mother, Donna, decided to take a short trip together, I never imagined it would mark the start of the most devastating chapter of my life. They called it a girls' getaway, a chance for them to relax, recharge, and enjoy nature. I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought, why not? Let them have some bonding time while I handle things at home. Our 2 kids were busy with school, so I figured I'd have plenty of quiet evenings to catch up on work and maybe even unwind myself. The house felt emptier without Karen's voice, but I assumed that was just the price of a little alone time. What I didn't realize was that the silence wasn't peace. It was the calm before the storm. Karen and Donna were gone for a week. They sent photos from their trip, smiling selfies in front of wineries, breathtaking shots of sunsets over rolling hills. It all seemed perfectly normal, even idyllic. Karen's texts were cheerful, full of little anecdotes about the places they visited and the quirky people they met. But when they came back, something felt off. Karen seemed distracted, distant, as if her mind was somewhere else. Donna, usually warm and chatty, was unusually quiet, avoiding eye contact even during casual conversations. I chalked it up to travel fatigue, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few days after their return, Donna mentioned in passing that she wasn't feeling well and needed to visit her doctor for a checkup. Karen offered to take her, and since I had the day off, Donna's husband, my father-in-law, Roger, and I decided to tag along. It wasn't planned. We just thought it would be nice to keep them company. Besides, Roger and I figured we could grab a coffee together while they were at the clinic. When we arrived at the doctor's office, Karen and Donna went in first while Roger and I sat in the waiting room, scrolling through our phones and chatting about the kids. About 20 minutes later, the doctor stepped out, and what we overheard froze us both in our seats. "Mrs. Sanders," the doctor said to Donna, "I understand your concerns, but I must stress again. This kind of thing needs to stop before it creates even more complications. It's already dangerous enough as it is." Roger and I exchanged confused glances. What kind of thing? What complications? My heart started pounding as my mind raced through every possible explanation. Then, just as the doctor turned to head back into the exam room, he muttered something under his breath. It was quiet, but we both heard it. "This situation with her daughter can't continue like this." I looked at Roger, his face pale and stricken. Neither of us said a word, but I knew we were both thinking the same thing. What on earth had we just stumbled upon? That was the moment everything changed. It was the beginning of a discovery that would shatter my world in ways I never thought possible. But at that moment, all I could do was wait. Wait to hear the truth, even if it destroyed me. Roger and I sat in stunned silence as the doctor's words echoed in our minds. This situation with her daughter can't continue like this. What did he mean? Was it something serious, medical, or something more sinister? I could see the same questions flashing across Roger's face, but neither of us dared to speak just yet. Minutes dragged by like hours as we waited for Karen and Donna to emerge from the exam room. I was tempted to go in and demand an explanation, but something in me held back. Maybe it was fear of what I might uncover, fear that the life I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers. When they finally came out, Karen's face was tight, her expression guarded. Donna looked worse, pale, uneasy, as if she'd just come back from delivering bad news. Roger, ever the calm and collected man, immediately put on a reassuring smile. "Everything okay?" he asked casually, though I could hear the tremor in his voice. Donna nodded too quickly. "Oh, just a routine checkup," she said, brushing past us toward the car. "Nothing to worry about." Karen gave me a half-smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're fine, really," she added, her tone clipped. "Mom just needs some rest." But something about their demeanor didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just fatigue, it was avoidance, plain and simple. They were hiding something, and I was determined to find out what. On the drive home, the atmosphere in the car was heavy. Donna sat in the back seat, staring out the window, while Karen fiddled with her phone, barely saying a word. Roger glanced at me a few times, his jaw tight, but he didn't say anything either. We both knew this wasn't the time. That evening, after Donna and Roger went home, Karen seemed unusually quiet. She barely spoke during dinner, and when I asked her if everything was okay, she shrugged it off. "I'm just tired, Mike. Can we not do this tonight?" I didn't push, but my gut told me there was more to the story. As she went to bed early, leaving me alone in the living room, I couldn't help but replay the events of the day. That strange look between Donna and Karen, the doctor's cryptic words, the way they both avoided eye contact. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't yet put together. Unable to sleep, I decided to do something I rarely ever did: go through Karen's phone. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I'd always trusted her, or at least I thought I did. But tonight, something felt different, like my instincts were screaming at me to dig deeper. I unlocked her phone. She never changed her passcode, and started scrolling through her messages. At first, everything seemed normal. Conversations with her friends, some mundane texts with Donna about their trip, even a chat thread with Roger about family plans. But then I stumbled upon a name I didn't recognize: Dr. Myers. I opened the thread, and my heart sank. "Thank you for keeping everything discreet," Karen had written just 2 days ago. "I can't risk Mike or Dad finding out." Dr. Myers replied, "Of course. Just make sure your mom stays calm. Stress could make things worse for her." What were they hiding? Why would Karen and Donna need to keep something from Roger and me? And why was Karen so worried about me finding out? I felt the walls closing in around me as I continued to scroll. Most of the messages were vague, but one in particular stood out. "It's not just about Mom," Karen had written. "If this gets out, it'll ruin everything." Ruin what? Our marriage? Our family? My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. I barely slept that night, my thoughts spiraling as I tried to make sense of what I just discovered. By morning, I knew I couldn't confront Karen. Not yet. I needed more information, more evidence. Whatever they were hiding, it was big, and I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers without knowing the full truth. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to unravel in ways I couldn't control. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I was about to find. The morning after my discovery was eerily quiet. Karen was up early, making breakfast for the kids like nothing had happened. She smiled and hummed as she flipped pancakes, but I could see through the act. Her eyes darted toward me every now and then, as if she was trying to gauge whether I had noticed anything unusual. I played along, keeping my expression neutral. I couldn't afford to tip her off just yet. I needed time to piece everything together, to figure out what kind of web I'd stumbled into. Once the kids were off to school, Karen suggested she and I spend some time together, maybe go out for lunch. It wasn't like her to be this spontaneous, and it felt like she was trying to distract me. I agreed, but my mind was elsewhere. Over lunch, she seemed overly cheerful, almost forced. She talked about the kids, our plans for the weekend, even a movie she wanted to see. I nodded along, pretending to be engaged, but inside, my thoughts were racing. I kept replaying the text messages in my head, trying to connect the dots. Then, as she sipped her iced tea, she casually said, "By the way, Mom and I are thinking of taking another trip next month. Just a weekend getaway." Something in me snapped. I couldn't let this go without probing. "Another trip? You just got back. What's the occasion?" She hesitated, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Oh, nothing special. Mom just thought it would be nice to visit some family upstate." "Family?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought you said this last trip was about relaxing and wine tasting. Now it's about family?" Karen set her glass down, her expression tightening. "Mike, why are you interrogating me? Can't I just have some time with my mom without it being a big deal?" Her defensive tone only confirmed my suspicions. I decided to back off, not wanting to escalate things. "Of course. Just curious, that's all," I said, forcing a smile. That evening, after Karen went to bed, I decided to do some digging. I started with Donna's social media accounts, scrolling through her posts and photos from their trip. Most of them were the usual, a vineyard here, a fancy dinner there, but one photo caught my attention. It was a group shot, taken at what looked like a private dinner. Karen and Donna were seated at a long table with several other people I didn't recognize. But what stood out was the man sitting next to Karen. He was leaning in close, smiling, his hand resting lightly on the back of her chair. I zoomed in on his face, trying to place him, but I didn't recognize him. He wasn't tagged in the photo, and there were no comments that mentioned him by name. But the way he looked at Karen, it wasn't the look of a stranger. I downloaded the photo and decided to keep digging. After about an hour of searching, I found another clue. A check-in from Donna at a hotel in Napa. The post was innocuous enough, but the comments told a different story. "Hope you and Karen had fun with the gang," one comment read. The gang. I muttered to myself. Who were these people and why was Karen spending time with them? I clicked on the commenter's profile, scrolling through their posts until I found a photo from the same dinner. This one was taken from a different angle, and it clearly showed the man next to Karen leaning even closer, whispering something in her ear. My stomach churned as I stared at the image. Who was this guy and what was he to my wife? I didn't sleep that night. The images and messages swirled in my head, each one adding another piece to the puzzle. But the picture they were forming was one I didn't want to see. The next day, I decided to confide in Roger. If anyone could help me figure this out, it was him. I called him and asked if we could meet for coffee, away from the house. When we sat down, I laid everything out, the text messages, the photos, the strange behavior. Roger listened intently, his face growing more serious with every detail I shared. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, letting out a deep sigh. "Mike, I had a feeling something was off after that doctor's visit. Donna's been acting strange ever since they got back. What do you think is going on?" I asked, desperate for answers. Roger hesitated, then said, "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's big. And I don't think it's just about Donna's health." His words sent a chill down my spine. I knew I had to keep digging, but I also knew I couldn't do it alone. Roger agreed to help, and we made a plan to keep an eye on both Karen and Donna. What we didn't know was that the truth we were about to uncover would be far worse than anything we'd imagined. Roger and I agreed to tread carefully. The last thing we wanted was to tip off Karen or Donna while we dug deeper into whatever they were hiding. But neither of us could shake the uneasy feeling that this wasn't just some minor family issue. The fragments of information we'd gathered so far hinted at something far more sinister. Over the next few days, Roger and I kept a close eye on them. Karen seemed to be back to her usual routine, but her behavior didn't quite match up. She was constantly on her phone, stepping outside to take calls or typing furiously with the screen tilted away from me. Donna, on the other hand, grew quieter and more withdrawn. Even Roger mentioned she was hardly speaking at home, often claiming she was just tired. The tension in the air was suffocating, and I knew I couldn't keep dancing around the truth. If Karen and Donna weren't going to tell us what was going on, we'd have to find out for ourselves. It was Roger who came up with the idea. "Donna has a habit of leaving her calendar out on the kitchen counter," he said during one of our secret coffee meetups. "She jots down everything, appointments, trips, even random notes. Maybe there's something in there that can give us a clue." The plan was simple. Roger would discreetly snap photos of Donna's calendar while she was out of the room, and we'd comb through them for anything unusual. It felt wrong, invading their privacy like this, but the gnawing suspicion that something was terribly amiss left us no choice. That evening, Roger sent me the photos. At first glance, the calendar seemed innocent enough. Doctor's appointments, dinner plans, and reminders about the kids. But then my eyes landed on an entry from the week of their trip. "Dinner with DM, private venue." "DM?" I texted Roger. "Any idea who that might be?" "No clue," he replied. "But it's not a name I've heard Donna mention before. Could be important." The next day, while Karen was out running errands, I decided to snoop further. If this DM person was connected to whatever was going on, I needed to find out who they were. I started with Karen's phone. She always took it with her, but I noticed she'd been syncing her photos and messages to our shared cloud account. a habit she likely forgot about. When I opened the cloud storage, my heart nearly stopped. Among the hundreds of family photos and random screenshots were several images from their trip that Karen hadn't shared with me. One photo stood out. Karen and Donna were seated at a lavishly set dinner table, with none other than the man from the previous group photo sitting next to Karen. His arm was casually draped across the back of her chair, his smile wide and self-assured. The caption beneath the photo read, "An unforgettable evening with DM and the group." Who was this man, and why was he so prominent in their trip? My stomach twisted as I scrolled through more photos. The same man appeared in nearly every shot from that dinner, always near Karen, always looking a little too comfortable. By now, I was teetering on the edge of panic. I had to confront Karen, but not without more solid evidence. So, I called Roger and told him what I'd found. He was equally disturbed but urged me to stay calm. "I'll do some digging on my end," he said. "There has to be a way to find out who this guy is." Roger's persistence paid off. A few days later, he called me with news. "I asked around," he said, his voice tense. "Turns out, DM is a doctor, a specialist in Napa. But here's the kicker, he's not a general practitioner. He runs a fertility clinic." I froze, the weight of his words sinking in. A fertility clinic? Why would Donna and Karen be meeting someone like that? "I don't know," Roger admitted. "But there's more. Apparently, he's well known for hosting these exclusive dinners for his wealthier clients, kind of like a networking event, but more personal." The pieces started to fall into place, but the picture they painted was horrifying. Why were Karen and Donna involved with this man? What kind of networking was happening at those dinners? And what did it have to do with the secrecy and the doctor's cryptic warning? That evening, I couldn't hold back any longer. Karen and I sat down after dinner and I decided to confront her. Gently at first. "I've been meaning to ask you something," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "That trip with your mom? Who's DM?" Her reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened, and her hand froze halfway to her glass of wine. "What? Who told you about DM?" she stammered. "That doesn't matter," I said, leaning forward. "What matters is why you and Donna were meeting with him, and why you've been so secretive ever since you came back." Karen opened her mouth to respond but closed it again, as if searching for the right words. Finally, she sighed and looked down at her hands. "It's complicated, Mike. That's not good enough," I said, my voice rising. "I deserve to know what's going on. What are you hiding from me?" She hesitated, then said, "It's about my mom. She's been struggling with some personal issues, and we went to see DM because he might be able to help." "What kind of issues?" I pressed. "And what does a fertility specialist have to do with any of this?" Karen's face turned pale. "How do you know he's a fertility specialist?" "I've done my homework, Karen. Now tell me the truth." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I told you it's complicated. Just drop it, okay?" Before I could respond, she stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with a head full of unanswered questions. But one thing was clear. Whatever Karen and Donna were hiding, it was big enough to scare her into silence. And I wasn't about to stop until I uncovered the truth. The days after my confrontation with Karen were tense, to say the least. She avoided me whenever possible, retreating into herself and barely speaking unless it was absolutely necessary. Donna, too, seemed unusually distant, her usual warmth replaced by a cold, almost guarded demeanor. The house felt heavier with each passing day, as if the walls themselves were closing in around me. Roger and I continued our investigation in secret. He started asking subtle questions around their social circle, hoping to piece together any connection to DM. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on Karen, noting every suspicious glance, every whispered phone call, and every moment she seemed to be lost in thought. One night, while Karen was taking a shower, I noticed her laptop sitting open on the kitchen counter. My heart pounded as I debated whether to look. The memory of her cryptic messages and the photos from their trip pushed me over the edge. Opening the laptop, I quickly navigated to her email. At first, there was nothing unusual. Work emails, spam, and the occasional forwarded joke from Donna. But then I found a folder labeled personal. Inside were dozens of emails between Karen and DM, stretching back months. Most of them were brief, discussing appointments and schedules. But one, dated just days before their trip, sent a chill down my spine. Karen, it's important that we handle this discreetly. You know how delicate the situation is. Let me know if Donna is ready to proceed. Proceed with what? What had they been planning? I barely had time to process the email when I heard Karen's footsteps coming down the hall. I closed the laptop and pretended to be scrolling on my phone, my heart racing as she walked into the room. She gave me a wary glance but said nothing, grabbing a glass of water before heading to bed. I waited until I was sure she was asleep before texting Roger. They've been planning something for months. I found emails. We need to meet. The next day, Roger and I met at a coffee shop far from home, our usual spot for these clandestine conversations. I showed him the email, and his face darkened as he read it. This isn't just about Donna, he said, shaking his head. Karen's just as involved in whatever this is. I know, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, but I still don't know what this is. And every time I try to get answers, Karen shuts me down. Roger leaned back, rubbing his temples. I've been asking around. DM has a reputation for being unconventional. He's known for taking on clients with unique or complicated requests. Whatever they went to him for, it's not your average medical issue. My stomach churned. What do we do? Roger looked me in the eye, his expression grim. We keep digging, and we don't stop until we know the truth. That evening, I got a call from Roger. His voice was shaky, a mixture of anger and disbelief. Mike, you need to come over. Now. I drove to his house, my mind racing with possibilities. When I arrived, he ushered me into his office and closed the door. You're not going to believe this, he said, handing me a folder. I called in a favor from a friend who works in medical records. It's worse than we thought. I opened the folder and stared at the documents inside. At first, they didn't make sense: patient records, appointment logs, and a series of financial transactions. But then I saw Donna's name, followed by Karen's. Both of them had been visiting DM's clinic regularly over the past year. And the payments? They weren't covered by insurance. They were coming out of Karen's personal account. Thousands of dollars, funneled into something she'd never mentioned to me. But the final page hit me like a freight train. It was a note from DM, attached to a record of a recent procedure. The words were burned into my mind. Embryo transfer successfully completed. Patient: Karen Sanders. Donor: Donna Sanders. I staggered back, the folder slipping from my hands. What does this mean? Roger's face was pale. Mike, they've been hiding this from us. Donna wasn't just getting medical help. She was helping Karen have a baby. The room spun as the realization hit me. The secrecy, the trips, the cryptic messages. It all pointed to one horrifying truth. Karen and Donna had been conspiring together, using DM's clinic to manipulate our family's future. And I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to forgive them. That night, I confronted Karen. She denied it at first, her voice trembling as she tried to deflect my questions. But when I showed her the documents, the color drained from her face. How did you get these? She whispered. It doesn't matter, I snapped. What matters is why you lied to me, why you and Donna kept this a secret. Do you even understand what you've done? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from guilt or fear. I didn't know how to tell you, she said quietly. I thought it was the only way. The only way to do what? I demanded. To have a child that's truly mine, she admitted, her voice breaking. Mike, I couldn't carry another baby naturally. Mom offered to help. She wanted to give us a chance. The weight of her words crushed me. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a calculated decision, one that had been made without me, without my input or consent. I didn't know what to say. All I knew was that the woman I thought I knew had been hiding a part of herself from me, and I wasn't sure if our marriage could survive the truth. As Karen broke down in front of me, I felt nothing but emptiness. The cracks in our relationship had grown too deep, and I wasn't sure if we could ever fill them again. And in the back of my mind, one question lingered, haunting me like a shadow. If they could hide this from me, what else were they capable of? The night after Karen's confession was the longest night of my life. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the documents Roger had uncovered. My emotions were a storm: anger, betrayal, confusion. But as the hours dragged on, another feeling began to creep in, the faintest glimmer of understanding. Karen's actions were wrong. There was no denying that. But underneath the lies and secrecy, I saw the desperation of a woman who had been silently struggling with her own pain. She wanted something she thought she could never have, and in her fear of losing it, she'd made decisions that tore us apart. The next morning, I decided it was time to talk. Really talk. No accusations, no anger. Just the truth. I found Karen sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Mike," she said softly, "I know I hurt you. I know I lied, and I'll never forgive myself for that. But please, let me explain." I nodded, sitting across from her. "I'm listening." Karen told me everything. About her struggles with infertility after our second child, the countless doctors who told her there was no hope, and how she'd carried that pain in silence for years. Donna had suggested the idea of surrogacy and offered to be the donor, and Karen had latched onto it as a way to preserve what she felt was slipping away: her ability to give us another child. "I didn't tell you because I was scared," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "Scared you'd say no, scared you'd think I was crazy, scared you'd leave me. I thought I was doing this for us, for our family. But now I see I was wrong. I should have trusted you." Her words hit me hard. For all the pain her choices had caused, I couldn't deny the love and fear behind them. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to hold on to something she thought was slipping away. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said honestly. "But I don't want to throw away everything we've built. If we're going to move forward, it has to be together. No more secrets." Karen nodded, her expression a mix of hope and regret. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Just tell me how." The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of our lives, but they were also a turning point. Karen and I started attending counseling together, something I never thought I'd agree to. At first, it was awkward and uncomfortable, but as the sessions went on, we began to understand each other in ways we never had before. I learned about the depth of Karen's pain and fear, and she learned how her actions had shattered my trust. Slowly, brick by brick, we started rebuilding the foundation of our marriage. Donna, too, played a role in the healing process. She apologized to both Roger and me for her part in the deception, admitting that she'd acted out of love for Karen but had underestimated the consequences. For the first time, our family began having honest, open conversations about our struggles and fears. As for the surrogacy, Karen and I agreed to put the plans on hold. We needed time to focus on repairing our relationship and finding joy in the family we already had. A year later, I can honestly say we're in a better place than we've ever been. The road wasn't easy, and there were moments when I thought we wouldn't make it. But through it all, we chose to fight for each other, to face the pain and heal together. Karen and I are stronger now, not because we pretended nothing happened, but because we confronted the truth and grew from it. Our love isn't perfect, but it's real, and it's worth fighting for. In the end, the experience taught me that even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance for light. And while the scars from that time will never fully fade, they remind me of how far we've come and how much we've overcome together. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from choosing to forgive, to grow, and to love again. And that's exactly what we did.